So it's 2023, and we're celebrating the NEDC's 20th anniversary. It is an honor for me to be here with the two of you, the main co-founders, to look back and maybe even look forward a little bit and just celebrate what God has done and continues to do through this organization. So Dr. David Stevens and Dr. Jeffrey Keenan, thanks so much for being here, and let's go ahead and get started. What motivated you to call Dr. Keenan with the idea of starting the NEDC in the first place?
I've been very involved in public policy as an ethicist, and during the embryonic stem cell research craze back in early 2000s, we can solve every disease if you just let us take the life of these embryos and harvest some cells. And I was in debates on national TV, and people would say, well, they're going to die anyway. They're going to die anyway. And I thought, no, they don't have to die anyway. There's families that want these children. And so thinking about that and praying about it, one day the idea came, well, what if we could help start something? And so I had one of my staff, I didn't know Dr. Keenan, look through our database, and there was his name, and it's just in Knoxville. So I gave him a call, and he was eagerly accept that call. We had the greatest conversation, and that was the seed that began to sprout and grow the National Embryo Donation Center.
So Dr. Keenan, take me back to that call from your perspective. How do you remember it?
Well, I was in my academic office sitting at my desk. I got a call, and of course I knew who Dr. Stevens was, so gladly took the call, and he said, Jeff, I think you're doing some embryo adoption in your practice. He said, well, what would you think about having a national embryo adoption facility? And I said, wow, that I have never thought of that. Dave thinks big, and I don't, and so that's I guess why he was such a good mentor to me there. And I said, that sounds like a great idea. Let me think about this a little bit and just see what I can come up with, how I think we might start something like that.
And this is the late 90s, right?
This was 1999, the first time Dave called me.
Okay, and the NEDC doesn't end up officially incorporating till 2003 as a 501c3 nonprofit. So take me through some of the challenges of getting the NEDC up and running. What was that like? Dr. Keenan, I guess I'll start with you.
Well, of course, there were a number of issues we had to overcome. We had to have a functioning IVF lab where embryos could be brought in and where they could be stored, thawed, and prepared for transfer. We didn't have that at the time. There were a lot of legalities for contracts for embryo donors and recipients. That was all uncharted and untested water at that time. There was not enthusiasm for it in some of our professional societies, so that was another thing that had to be overcome. And then just getting the manpower together to start this, the employees, the embryologists, and the other staff members that were necessary. So yeah, there were a lot of pieces to it. Fortunately, CMDA came through with a lot of their expertise. Bethany Christian Services, who at that time was the biggest provider of adoption placements in the country, partnered with us, and then Baptist Health Systems of East Tennessee, and that's another whole story. But it all came together, and without really a whole lot of my doing, and so I mean it was clearly a God thing.
Yeah, definitely a God thing. And we began to promote the idea, as things started coming together with our members. I mean, with thousands of physicians across the country, how can you promote this to your patients? They may not be in IVF themselves or even an OBGYN, but they have patients that have infertility and are asking questions. So we had the ability to get the word out in those days. And then we had to get a 501c3. And I became the first chair of the board for a few years,
Quite a few.
and got so busy I had to step back. So there's always been someone from CMDA on that board to keep that relationship close. And God just did good things. I mean, you look back and say, I'm not sure how all that happened, but it did.
Well, and I guess that's my question. This took 4 years really to put together. Do you remember, was there a moment when you knew, okay, this is going to become a reality? That's a long time for something to come together.
Yeah.
Dr. Keenan, do you remember?
Well, a couple of things. As I say, we had to have a facility and a lab and things like that. And, my practice was growing, expanding. I needed more space. Went to UT. UT didn't have any space. So I thought, we're shut down there. And then someone from Baptist Health Systems walks into my office and says, hey, can we talk to Dr. King? We're opening a new facility. We'd like to see if he's interested in getting space. And I said, what? Gee, as a matter of fact, I do need some new space. And so I spoke to the administrator, Dale Collins, there, and arranged to speak to the whole board of Baptist Health Systems of East Tennessee, gave them a presentation. They were very enthusiastic about it. And that was certainly one of the milestones when they said, yes, we will support this, we'll approve this, we'll help you with it, we'll allow you to use some hospital employees, we'll support this in any way that you need. I think that was one of the big milestones for sure.
I remember praying for that meeting because
Yeah.
it was an important one.
Yes, it sure was.
You guys were, in this shoulder to shoulder again for several years. Back when it started, when it got off the ground in 2003, does either of you remembering what you hoped and honestly expected the NEDC could accomplish? Any sort of expectations from either of you?
I hoped it was going to grow like crazy, but because I always have big ideas and always seem to get other people involved in them. So, and Dr. Keenan did most of the work, but we really thought that this could make a huge difference, not only in patients' lives, but also in the public policy debates that were going on then and even now. To say, here's an alternative. Here's a way that you can preserve life. Here's a way you can help a family. And so I was really tuned into that side, as well as seeing this be successful. And God just put the pieces together. I think that's often the case when you look back and see something that seemed almost impossible. And then people come and other people have been thinking, or other people are open to your idea, because it really was a group effort with a lot of different organizations and people. And of course, people at the head of it leading the charge and casting the vision.
Did you have any expectations, Dr. Keenan?
Well, I had hopes, I guess, more than expectations. And, some of them have been realized and then some, and others have not been realized. And, so one of my hopes was that we could have centers around the country doing embryo donation and adoption. Unfortunately, I realized it was very, very difficult to find very many reproductive endocrinologists who were ideologically aligned with our principles and values. We did find one. We had an affiliate. We've had affiliates on 2 different occasions now, and now it's just us again. So that's perhaps one hope that hadn't been fulfilled. But on the other hand, we here at the main center in Knoxville have grown very, very quickly and very well. And our pregnancy rates have been 10% higher than national averages, which is relatively very, very high. And so because of that, we have garnered a national and even somewhat of an international reputation. And so that's beyond my expectations, I would say. And to now be planning our 1,500 baby celebration, never did not think I would see that.
Yeah. I think the numbers are just extraordinary, and more than anyone in the country that has done this type of thing. And secondly, I think keeping this as, Christ-centered and pro-life has been one of the keys, and Jeff has led that charge. I mean, it's not always been easy, and people have criticized and pushed and tried to force things, but I think God's honored that. And the other thing that really amazed me was the ability to get national grants at times to actually promote this across the country and go to practices and groups. And, I never imagined that would happen, that we would have some grants to promote this option, but God provided them.
So each of you, what's the greatest satisfaction of your being a part of the NEDC as you look back on it now? It's been going for 2 decades. Dr. Keenan?
I think just the fact that this is an organization that helps both the donors and the recipients. And of course, the embryos are right in the mix of that, right? So the donors are in a terrible quandary about, and they're just, heartbroken about, we feel that we can't use these embryos. What do we do with them? We can't throw them away. And that's a terrible moral dilemma for them. And then so many couples want to start a family and they fail traditional adoption, or they can't afford traditional adoption. And for many other reasons that come to us, they're at the end of the rope, and we're their last gasp, their last hope. And to be able to see those couples then come through and have a child that they really had pretty much given up hope on, I think is probably the greatest satisfaction.
I think one of the things that amazed me, had the opportunity to go to some of the celebrations and to see not only the families that have received the embryos, but the open adoption, and the family that donated them is there, celebrating with this couple, seeing their children that have been adopted by this other couple, and just the joy. I mean, it was just joy, 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 and smiles and happiness and laughter. And, I had never imagined that. I had thought of the embryos and I thought of the families that are accepting them, but when that open adoption, and both groups are celebrating and what's happening with the children.
And I agree with you. To me, you really have to, and I've been at 3 of them. I think I've been at 3 of the 4 that we've held. So, I mean, I've been at 3 of these celebrations where we get, so many, hundreds of NEDC people together. And sometimes you have the recipient couples meeting the donor couples that they're matched with. And you see all these kids around having fun, these kids who otherwise would not be in the world, speaking to your original vision. No, they're not just throwaways. So yeah, to me, that nothing drives home what the NEDC is about, like being at those celebrations. Dr. Keenan, are there any significant moments or achievements that you would take me back to that stand out as really memorable to you in the 20 years of the NEDC?
Well, yeah, I think, the 1,000 baby mark, there's just something about 1,000 babies that's so great. But, really, I guess, rather than a moment, just sort of the whole experience of just watching God work in the way that he has, and to see how he has, put all the pieces of this together, and to see the couples that he's brought to us. And the couples, so many of them are just wonderful, faithful Christian couples. And of course, we serve couples of all faith. But that's another opportunity for us to tell them why we're there, why we're doing this. And so, and then, of course, to have the gratitude of those patients and know you've really positively changed their lives forever. And that's
Yeah.
very gratifying.
And when they're almost hopeless and come to this opportunity, and then they get pregnant. I mean, I know how that is in the office, because something they thought never was going to happen, all of a sudden has happened, and you get to be there for that joyous moment.
Yeah.
I've done that as a physician as well, not with IVF, but it's pretty amazing to be part of that journey with couples.
How has being a part of the NEDC shaped your own relationship with God, each of you? Dr. Stevens, I'll start with you.
Well, I think it honors God. And, my dad used to say, the only thing you'll take to heaven with you is other people. And I've tried to live that out. And here, through Jeff and the NEDC and the staff, all these people have found joy here on earth, but God's found joy in heaven, and that these lives that have been saved and his children that were actually born and not discarded. And so that's really the greatest blessing to me. And we won't know the whole story till we all get to heaven. That's what we'll spend eternity doing.
Certainly, yeah, echo Dave's thoughts there. But also just faith and trust, I think, are big, big, big things, because I've said several times now how, we thought, well, how are we going to do this? And but you learn that if this is something that God has his blessing on, it'll happen. And you have to be open to things, but you don't have to take every little detail and figure it out, because sometimes that's just not even possible. And other times it's just not practical, but God will take care of it. And so, yeah, I just in looking to see what he's done through the organization and then through the couples, and that has increased their faith, is just very profound.
Is there anything, as you look down the road, what would you like the NEDC to be doing? What would you like it to look like 10 or 20 years from now? How would you like it to be different than, doing something that we're not doing now? Is there anything like that? Or do you have a vision for what you hope this organization will be 10 or in another decade or two?
I think what I wish for it to be is what Jeff's already mentioned, that this is going to be multiple sites all over the country and perhaps even the world. I mean, you think of other places where this is needed, and not just in developed countries, but undeveloped countries. I remember as a missionary, one couple came in with infertility, and Kenya had the highest population growth in the world. And I was a young missionary. I thought, well, good, because we got so many people, and we're going to do it with all these people. And I went down to see the doctor, been there longer, and he said, Dave, you don't understand. If this woman doesn't have a child, her husband will send her home. Her life will be over. He'll get the dowry back. And you need to do everything you can to see if you can help her get pregnant. And I learned how to do that during residency, and we did it, and they got pregnant. But that need is so great around the world. And NEDC has such good processes, procedures, and success rates. It would be wonderful if we had multiple sites in this country and even places we've never even dreamed of.
Is that similar to your vision, Dr. Keenan?
Absolutely. But I would add, and I often say, our biggest goal is to put ourselves out of business, that we would have enough of an influence on the culture and the profession that we are not creating innumerable embryos and embryos that, are almost surely not going to be used, that, either through just professional standards or perhaps through even government regulation, as many developed countries have. There are some limits on our assisted reproductive technology, because we have none in the United States. And so, I would like to see that as part of the equation. I'd like to see some kind of legislation limiting the number of embryos created now, especially now that we can freeze eggs, and then just requiring the couples to say, if you're going to create these embryos, you need to use them, which is what we've always done, and then or adopt them out, but preferably use them. That's always the best solution for embryos, and so that we could, instead of, we're doing a lot of embryo transfers, but we're not keeping up with the huge influx of frozen embryos, because there's so much IVF going on in our country now.
And create as many as we can. And if we don't use them, they're not persons, they're just tissue. Yeah. That's the attitude. If people could see, and this country could see, embryos as persons, we could solve a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good prayer. And if that prayer comes true, that would be the best thing, that the NEDC doesn't have to be around for 40 years, 20 more years, right? Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.